A couple of weeks ago, I called the top on the market. Um, Pretty much to the day so far, but we'll see how it works out. The market has a strange habit of behaving strangely at the moment. But I think, regardless of whether it turns out to be the top or within a few percentage of it, we are in a situation now in which we are heading into a disastrous, absolutely horrendous liquidity crunch that I think will probably usher in the next stage of humanity, and where the power lies, the poles of the world will shift essentially with what comes next. I think fundamentally driving all of this will be decisions, as it normally is when these shifts happen. Decisions, poor decisions made by the people elected to represent the population of the most important people in the world at that time. In the same way that Rome eventually got to the point where it couldn't please the plebs any longer and was spending far too much money trying to solve problems that it didn't really have except for its own making. I think we are in that same situation with the US. The only difference, I suppose, is that I can't see this time a really obvious candidate to take over the position of the world's leading civilization and culture. For every problem that America has, China currently has two of those problems. But if we sort of go back, Trump's decision to invade Iran was just utterly insane. Even if it all ends tomorrow, the costs put on to an already over leveraged system in which commodities are hard to come by, whilst demand for those commodities is increasing. This huge build out that is taking place across the Western world, but particularly in America, for a technology that revenue wise is currently returning 4 cents on every dollar spent on the build out. With the extra stress that's been put on the market and the subsequent liquidity crunch that will arise from that, notably at the moment the squeeze from the threat to the carry trade, there's just all the ingredients for everything to go horrendously wrong. And the cash generating machines of the American economy are suddenly becoming debt laden concerns with negative free cash flow projected for the next few years. You know, your Amazons, your Googles. This is insane. Absolutely insane. You know, this is you know, these hyperscalers, these AI companies, these people trying to seize the zeitgeist of the next generation of humanity's interaction with technology, have basically turned what should be an investment cycle, a responsible, slow, measured investment cycle, into a fight to the death. That's what we've created here. If even half of the revenue generating capacity disappears from the market, and who retains the lion's share of the AI revenue, it still will not be enough to cover the build out. and it's questionable whether it will be enough to cover the second cycle of updated equipment as technology progresses in that sector. We are in an utterly almighty mess. Already last year, the majority of AI spending that went to the likes of Nvidia, Micron, TSMC, that supported these massive valuations was debt based. 60% of all business that came through Nvidia's, Micron's, AMD's, TSMC's doors was debt based on the promise of a technology which is currently returning. And apparently we've already reached AGI, by the way, according to Jensen and a couple of other people. That is currently returning 4 cents on every dollar spent on it. Energy is getting more expensive. The efficiencies will not come there, and that's fundamentally the bottleneck facing these hyperscalers. Commodities are more expensive. Everything's going up in price. Revenues will be squeezed more. There's a perfectly reasonable chance that if we genuinely face a private credit crisis in the developed world, that the B2B margins get squeezed to the extent where we look at the revenue from the AI trade dropping down to 1 or 2 cents for every dollar invested. We are in, I don't think people realise how incredibly damaging this situation is already to the wider economy, and what's going to happen over the next year or two, if we get that far before this whole thing just blows up. But what's going to happen over the next year or two as liquidity is further removed from the market and the general economy, as these hyperscalers start issuing equity in order to be able to fund their capex again on a technology which returns 4 cents for every dollar invested, and a technology that nobody has currently any insight as to how it turns profitable, let alone provides the return on investment to justify the money spent so far. This could and should have been a 10, 15, 20 year mature journey in which companies worked out the best and most efficient way to do AI. And instead it's turned into almost like a teenage orgasm of expenditure in the hope that we reach some sort of conclusion in the near term. And the people driving this, concerto of recklessness are not business people. They are geniuses in their own right, because they're able to build these fantastic machines which will no doubt become the most life-changing technologies humanity has ever seen. We will essentially palm off responsibility for research and much decision making onto non-sentient beings, or sentient, depending on how you measure that. It will change humanity forever. It will probably save us from extinction. It will probably resolve many of the issues we have in our societies. But this is centuries away. This is not round the corner. And we are spending like it is around the corner. The carry trade's under pressure again. Obviously I spoke about that a couple of weeks ago. yeah, we are just. There's something I was looking at earlier on today, which was regarding the amount of debt taken out for the build out during the dot-com bubble or the dark fiber, and we have now exceeded that. And what people forget is they say that okay, but once the bubble burst, lots of good companies remained, and then we ended up in a situation in which the internet changed the world, and that's absolutely true. But if you actually look at the period between the dot-com bubble bursting, which is the year 2000, and the point at which the internet changed the economy, not just life in general, not just, people meeting in fucking chat rooms and whatever they used to do in the day, and being able to email somebody in the Masai Mara or whatever. I'm talking about actually change the economy. Arguably, there was a gap of around 10 years. And companies like Amazon, in that entire cycle, were down about 9 billion on capex, building out systems that was sort of in a way based on traditional business that they knew would come good in the end, but they weren't given carte blanche to just spend money recklessly to the extent that people are doing so now in terms of scale. And that is the thing that concerns me more than anything, is that there will come a moment when the market realizes that the path to profitability extends beyond the horizon. And that moment will probably bring down the American economy in a way only comparable to 2008, and terrifyingly potentially comparable because of the macro factors introduced by the aforementioned Mr. Trump, could be comparable to 1929. And all that comes with that. If you 1929 wasn't just a market crash, it was a turning point in human history. It was the beginning of the collapse of a stable Germany. Obviously there were other factors involved in that, I have no doubt. But it was the economic fuel for what came next. The most disastrous chapter of certainly European, but you could argue world history. And the damage we are able to do now is infinitely worse. One misstep between the USA, China, Europe, Russia could end life as we know it on Earth, and not usher in a new triumphant world like the Second World War did afterwards, in which we discovered that we probably should treat people like human beings, but a world in which humans struggle to survive because of the amount of damage left behind. And we are in a very, very, very precarious situation. I've thought about this deeply over the past. I should explain, my other job is a history teacher. Was a history teacher. I'm not doing it at the moment. But I've thought about this a lot over the past sort of 6 months or so, as it's become clear where the economy is headed once everybody just wakes up and realizes this isn't an infinite money tree, this AI revolution. I think people were clinging onto it for dear life because they genuinely thought, right, this is our saviour, this is the thing that's going to get us out of this massive volatility and this uncertainty. We've finally got something we can cling to that represents hope, that represents something different. And they're right, in the same way that all the people that built up the dark fibre were right. They just got their timing wrong. And so my only thing that I'm fairly happy about is if we follow the same cycle that we did at the start of the last century, and you know, we were talking almost 100 years to the day, if it plays out, is that I am young enough to be able to potentially try and defend myself in a wartime situation. That is the solace I am taking from the timing of this current issue. Once the AI bubble pops, GDP collapses, like absolutely collapses, and we are looking at best, a lost decade in the markets, and at worst, the start or the catalyst for devastation, the likes which humanity has never seen. And it all comes back to greed. The American people weren't happy with their situation, so they elected somebody who doesn't have the best interests of anyone in the world at heart. This was following on from the back of reckless government spending from the world's preeminent superpower, the most powerful nation that has ever lived, trying to create some sort of neo-imperial empire, which then led to a situation in which it became the only player in town financially because of the reckless spending of the government and how loose the monetary policy was, which then led to everybody piling in to the AI bubble and things like Bitcoin and other such things that have value that isn't reflected in their price, let's put it that way. And I think the next 3 or 4 years, 5 years will be absolutely imperative to the future of the Western world. And I don't think we're going to navigate it properly. But if we do, we can retain the course of development of humankind for the next 100 years at least. If we do not, then we will once again be reminded that progress is not linear.